Muhammad Ali stared down his opponent with hatred, his eyes burning with an intensity that made the entire Madison Square Garden fall silent. This wasn't the playful banter, the theatrical showmanship that had made him famous. This was something darker, something that cut deeper than any punch he'd ever thrown. The man across from him wasn't just another boxer. He was the reason Ali's world had crumbled. It was 1976, and Ali was 34 years old. His famous speed was starting to fade. His reflexes not quite what they once were, but his pride, his fire that burned as bright as ever. Across the ring stood Jimmy Morrison, a fighter he'd mentored years ago, a young man he'd taken under his wing like a son. Morrison had betrayed him in the most personal way possible. He'd destroyed Ali's marriage by having an affair with his wife Belinda. The crowd sensed the tension. This wasn't just about a title. This was about honor, about trust, about the deepest kind of pain a man could feel. Ali's hands trembled not from fear, but from the barely contained rage that threatened to consume him. He'd spent weeks training not just his body, but his mind, feeding on the anger, letting it fuel every sprint, every punch, every moment of preparation. Before I continue, I need to ask you something. This channel exists only because of you. You matter to me. I know you value stories told with soul. If you feel something real just from this beginning, subscribe now. Seriously. It costs you nothing, but means everything to me who creates each story with love. 3 months earlier, Ali had walked into his Chicago home after a training session, his body aching, but his spirit high. He'd been preparing for what many thought would be his farewell tour, a final few fights before retirement. The house was unusually quiet. Belinda always had dinner ready, always greeted him with a kiss and questions about his day. Instead, he found a note on the kitchen table. Her handwriting, usually so careful and loving, was rushed, jagged with emotion. "Muhammad, I can't do this anymore. Jimmy and we never meant for it to happen. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." The paper shook in his hands as he read it twice, 3 times, hoping the words would somehow change. Jimmy Morrison, the kid from Detroit he'd found fighting in underground clubs, desperate for a chance. Ali had seen something in him, raw talent, hunger, the kind of determination that reminded him of his younger self. He'd brought Jimmy into his camp, taught him everything he knew, treated him like family. Jimmy had eaten at their table, played. With Ali's children called him Champ, with genuine reverence. The betrayal cut deeper than any loss in the ring ever could. Ali had lost fights before, to Joe Frazier, to Ken Norton, but he'd never lost his faith in people he loved. He'd trusted Jimmy with everything, including access to his home, his family, his life. That trust had been shattered into pieces sharper than broken glass. The media had a field day. Headlines screamed about the scandal, about the great Muhammad, Ali being brought low not by a superior opponent, but by a broken heart. Sports writers, who had once celebrated his wit and charm, now dissected his personal life with surgical precision. Some called it karma for his earlier arrogance. Others saw it as the tragic fall of an American icon. Ali withdrew from the public eye for weeks. He trained in silence, his usual entourage of supporters and hangers-on dismissed. His trainer, Angelo Dundee, watched with growing concern as Ali transformed from the ebullient showman the world knew into something harder, colder, more focused than he'd been since his early professional days. "Champ, you sure you want to take this fight?" Angelo had asked one evening as Ali pounded the heavy bag with a ferocity that made the entire gym vibrate. "This ain't about boxing no more." Ali had stopped mid-punch, his breathing heavy. "Yeah, it is about boxing. It's about showing that boy what happens when you betray someone who loved you. It's about making him pay for every lie, every moment he smiled in my face while stabbing me in the back." The fight was arranged quickly. Morrison's People wanted it. They saw an aging, emotionally compromised Ali as an easy target for their rising star. Ali's people were worried, but they knew him well enough to know that no one could talk him out of it. This was personal now. The press conferences were tense affairs. Morrison, usually confident and talkative, seemed subdued, almost ashamed. He couldn't meet Ali's eyes directly. When reporters asked about the relationship between the two fighters, Morrison would mumble about it being just business now. Ali, meanwhile, spoke in cold, measured tones that were more frightening than any of his famous trash talk. "I taught that boy everything he knows," he said during one particularly uncomfortable interview. "Everything. How to throw a left hook, how to move his feet, how to be a man. Apparently I failed at that last one." The tension in the room was suffocating. Veteran sports reporters who had covered Ali for years said they'd never seen him like this. Not playful, not philosophical, just angry in a way that felt dangerous. If this story has already awakened something in you, however small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and subscribe now. Ali's training camp became a monastery of rage. He woke before dawn, ran through the streets of Deer Lake, Pennsylvania in complete silence. Where he once shadowboxed with flair and showmanship, now his movements were economical, brutal, focused entirely on efficiency and damage. His sparring partners reported that he was hitting harder than he had in years, but with none of the playfulness that had always characterized his style. He studied film of Morrison obsessively. Every habit, every tendency, every weakness. Morrison favored his right hand, dropped his left when he got tired, had a tell when he was about to throw his famous uppercut. Ali memorized it all with the dedication of a scholar preparing for the most important exam of his life. Dr. Ferdi Pacheco, Ali's physician, was concerned. "Muhammad, your blood pressure is elevated. You're not sleeping well. This kind of stress at your age and your condition—" "I've never been more ready for anything in my life, Doc," Ali interrupted. "My body knows what it needs to do." But privately, Ali was struggling. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, alone in his training camp cabin, and for just a moment forget why Belinda wasn't there. Then the memory would crash back like a physical blow. The betrayal, the humiliation, the knowledge that two people he'd loved most in the world had conspired against him. He'd taken care of Morrison financially when the kid was struggling. He'd introduced him to influential people in the boxing world. He'd shared stories of his own mistakes, tried to help Morrison avoid the pitfalls that had nearly derailed Ali's own career. And all the while, Morrison had been planning his betrayal. The worst part was the children. Ali's kids had adored Jimmy, called him Uncle Jimmy. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that Uncle Jimmy isn't coming around anymore because he took Mommy away? How do you maintain dignity when every child visits you in this camp now comes with questions about why Mommy doesn't live at home anymore? As the fight drew closer, Ali's team noticed changes beyond just his training intensity. He'd always been meticulous about his appearance, proud of his looks, his style. Now he seemed almost careless about everything except the boxing. He ate mechanically, slept little, spoke only when necessary. Angelo Dundee confided to one reporter off the record that he was worried about what would happen to Ali after this fight, regardless of the outcome. "Win or lose," Angelo said, "I don't know how he comes back from this kind of hurt." The final sparring sessions were legendary among those who witnessed them. Ali moved with a precision and aggression that reminded everyone why he'd been able to defeat Foreman in Zaire, why he'd survived 3 wars with Joe Frazier. But there was something else there too, a kind of desperation, as if this fight was the only thing standing between him and complete emotional collapse. Morrison, meanwhile, was having his own struggles. Reports from his camp suggested he was distracted, unfocused. He'd signed endorsement deals expecting an easy victory over an aging former champion, but as the fight approached, he began to realize he was facing not just Muhammad Ali the boxer, but Muhammad Ali the wounded animal. His trainer tried to remind him that Ali was 34, that his legs weren't what they used to be, that his reflexes had slowed. But Morrison had sparred with Ali enough times to know that when the great man was motivated, age became irrelevant. The Vegas odds favored Morrison, but the smart money was staying away. Too many variables, too much emotion, too much history between these two men for anyone to predict what would happen when they finally faced each other in that ring. The night of the fight, Madison Square Garden was electric with tension. Celebrities, politicians, and boxing legends filled the ringside seats. Frank Sinatra was there, as was Elvis Presley. Joe Frazier, despite their legendary rivalry, had come to support Ali. Even he understood that this was about more than boxing. The crowd was divided. Some came hoping to see Ali reclaim his dignity, to prove that class and character would triumph. Others wanted to see if the young lion could truly dethrone the aging king. But everyone sensed they were witnessing something unprecedented, a fight that would reveal the very soul of Muhammad Ali. The preliminaries felt endless. Each undercard bout stretched like eternity as the anticipation built. When Ali finally emerged from the tunnel, the roar was deafening, but it carried undertones of uncertainty. This wasn't the confident dancing Ali of old. This was someone harder, more focused, almost mechanical in his preparation. Morrison entered, to a mixed reaction. Many in the crowd had lost respect for him, viewing him as ungrateful, treacherous. He tried to maintain his usual swagger, but his eyes kept darting to Ali's corner, as if he couldn't quite believe this moment had arrived. The rules meeting in the center of the ring was uncomfortable. The referee, veteran Arthur Mercante, had to position himself between the two fighters as they received instructions. Ali stared holes through Morrison, who kept his eyes fixed somewhere over Ali's shoulder. When they were told to touch gloves, the tension reached its peak. Morrison extended his glove hesitantly. Ali looked at it for a long moment, and just as the crowd held its breath expecting him to refuse, he touched gloves. But his eyes never left Morrison's face, and what Morrison saw there made him step back involuntarily. They returned to their corners, and the arena fell silent in anticipation. Ali sat on his stool, his gaze never wavering from Morrison. Angelo Dundee whispered final instructions, but Ali seemed not to hear him. He was somewhere else entirely, in a place where years of friendship and trust had been shattered by betrayal. The bell rang for round one, and both fighters met in the center of the ring. For the first minute, they felt each other out, circling warily. Morrison threw a few jabs, testing Ali's reflexes. Ali slipped them easily, but made no immediate counterattacks. He was studying, calculating, waiting for his moment. Then, midway through the round, Morrison threw a combination that caught Ali on the temple. It was a good shot, one that might have stunned a lesser fighter. But Ali just smiled. Not his old confident smile, but something colder, more predatory. It was then that Morrison realized what he was truly facing. This wasn't the aging, heartbroken man he'd expected. This was Muhammad Ali at his most dangerous, with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The crowd sensed it too. The atmosphere shifted from anticipation to something approaching fear. They were about to witness not just a fight, but a reckoning. What happened next would be talked about for decades. As the round continued, Ali began to take control. His jabs were sharper, more frequent. His movement, while not as fluid as in his prime, was purposeful and effective. Morrison tried to establish his own rhythm, but Ali was disrupting everything, making the younger man fight Ali's fight. In the second round, Ali really began to assert himself. A beautiful combination sent Morrison stumbling backward. The crowd roared, sensing blood. Ali pressed forward, and for a moment it looked like he might end it early. Morrison was hurt, covering up, trying to survive, but then something strange happened. Instead of pressing his advantage, Instead of going for the knockout that seemed inevitable, Ali stopped. He took a step back, his hands still up but no longer throwing punches. Morrison, confused and hurt, lowered his guard slightly. The two fighters stood there for several seconds, the arena in stunned silence. What happened next broke the hearts of even the most die-hard fans. Ali lowered his hands completely. He walked to the center of the ring, directly in front of Morrison, and removed his mouthpiece. "I forgive you," he said loudly enough for the first few rows to hear. Morrison's eyes filled with tears. The betrayal, the guilt, the months of training and preparation, it all crashed down on him at once. Ali continued speaking, his voice carrying over the silent arena. "I taught you to be better than this. I taught you that being a champion isn't just about winning fights. It's about character. It's about being a man." Morrison dropped his hands to his sides completely. Tears were streaming down his face now. "Champ, I know you're sorry," Ali said. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me the way you did, but you can't unfight this fight, just like you can't undo what you did to my family." The referee, Arthur Mercante, stood frozen, unsure how to handle this unprecedented situation. The crowd was murmuring, some angry, some confused, some moved by what they were witnessing. Ali had proven his point. He could have destroyed Morrison, could have taken his revenge in the most public and humiliating way possible. Instead, he chose something harder. He chose forgiveness, even in the middle of the fight. "I don't need to beat you up to beat you," Ali said. "I just needed to prove that I could, that the man who trained you, who cared about you, who treated you like family, that man is still here, still strong, still the champion." Morrison collapsed to his knees in the center of the ring, overwhelmed by emotion. Ali stood over him, no longer as an opponent, but as the mentor he'd always been. The referee counted Morrison out, not because he'd been knocked down, but because he couldn't continue fighting. Technical knockout due to emotional breakdown. It was unprecedented in professional boxing. Ali helped Morrison to his feet as the final bell rang. They embraced in the center of the ring, both men crying now. The crowd was on its feet, no longer certain if they'd witnessed a fight or something far more profound. In interviews afterward, Ali was philosophical. "I realized that destroying Jimmy wouldn't bring my marriage back. It wouldn't heal the hurt. But showing him and showing myself that I could be the bigger man, that I could choose forgiveness even when revenge was in my grasp, that's a different kind of victory." Morrison retired from boxing immediately after the fight. He never spoke publicly about the affair again, but he did become a youth counselor, working with at-risk kids, trying to teach them about making better choices than he had. Ali fought 2 more times after that night, but everyone knew the Morrison fight was his real farewell. He'd proven everything he needed to prove, not just about his boxing ability, but about his character, his capacity for forgiveness, his understanding of what truly makes a champion. Years later, when asked about that night, Ali would say, "The hardest punch I ever threw was the one I didn't throw, and it was the one that mattered most. If you made it this far and felt every word, won't you leave without subscribing?" I tell these stories with my heart in my hands to reach people like you who feel, who get moved, who live. If this truly touched you, give back, comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.